Hello, my name is Daniel Gabarro. I have been an educator for the past 25 years, working with students of all ages, from kindergarten up to the university level. I'm here today to tell you about a new innovative method to help your students improve their spelling skills. This method is based on neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, an applied branch of psychology. Now I'm going to briefly explain to you how this method works. You can download more detailed information about the method from the publisher's website at www.boiraeditorial.com. So, what is the purpose of this presentation? Well, basically, it is to help you understand why some of your students don't seem to be making progress with their spelling, regardless of all of your efforts to help them. Why is it that even some of your brightest students can't seem to improve their spelling skills? After watching this video, you'll discover why this happens and how you can help your students improve their spelling by up to 80%. As an educator myself, I know just as well as you do what happens in the majority of your classes. You notice that in every group there seems to be two types of students. Some of your students have no difficulty learning how to spell, but there are some students that seem to have always had trouble with spelling, and these poor spellers do not get any better. I'm going to explain why this happens and what you can do to help these students improve their spelling skills. I know what it's like. I remember how it feels. You try your best. You do everything within your power to help your students get better. You try every type of activity you can think of: group activities, pair work, dictations, special spelling books, and computer programs, but nothing seems to help your poor spellers. Why can't they improve? What is holding them back? How can you make a difference? How can you help them change? The answer to this question is quite simple. In fact, I'm going to let you see for yourself. You will discover the key to being a good speller. You'll see for yourself what makes you and the majority of teachers sure that you know when a word is spelled correctly. Let me ask you a question. And don't worry, I'll give you a moment to think about the answer. Let's take, for instance, the word because. Are you absolutely sure you know how to spell the word because? Are you sure about it? Beyond the shadow of a doubt? Would you be willing to bet on it? There it is. You can see it on the screen. And I'm sure that you spelled it correctly. Let me ask you another one. Are you absolutely positive that you know how to spell the word friend? You do, don't you? Have a look at the screen and check it yourself. So, how do you do it? What mental process do you use that allows you to be sure of the spelling of a word? What is going on inside your head and in your mind while you are thinking about the way a word is spelled? How can you be sure that it is spelled correctly? How did you know that because begins with BE and not BI, or that friend has an I and then it goes before the E? What about the word address? How do you know that it is spelled the way it is? Why do you know? I know why you are sure about the spelling of these words. I know because I have seen it over and over again in every teacher training course I have ever taught. The words people use to describe it may be different, but every good speller does the same thing. They can see the word in front of them. You picture the word when you think about how it is spelled. Look at address. There it is. Why did you know it had two D's and two S's? You knew because you saw the word in your mind and copied it or read it from the mental image you had of it. This is what good spellers do. This is the secret mental strategy. And this is what we should teach our students to do. Until they learn to visualize words in their mind, until they learn this secret, many students will use ineffective techniques. Let me explain why some of your students have so much trouble spelling. In general, most poor spellers do something very simple. Instead of using a visual strategy, the one you were just using a moment ago, when you were visualizing the words in your mind, most poor spellers use an auditory strategy. I explain this in more detail in the free material you can download from the website I mentioned before. But what does that mean when I say that they use an auditory strategy? It means that they try to spell words based on how they sound. Sometimes they try so hard that they read their assignments out loud to make sure they have written down the sounds they wanted to. And no matter how hard they try, no matter how many hours they spend studying and doing exercises, as long as they use an auditory strategy, they won't be good spellers. Well then, what should you do? The answer to that question is pretty obvious, isn't it? Don't you wish that when you were studying to become a teacher, someone had told you about all of this? What you should do is teach your students who have trouble spelling to see words when they are trying to spell them instead of thinking about how they sound. This is what all teachers should do. Why is this so important? Well, once your students learn to see words when they try to spell them instead of sounding them out, all the spelling activities you do with them will be more effective. It's as if your students put each new word they learn inside a bag they carry around with them, and every time they want to write a word, they take it out and look at it. They can't go wrong. They can't make a mistake. You didn't make a mistake when you spelled the words address, or friend, or because. And why not? Because you could see the words. If you can help your students see the words instead of sounding them out, you will help them achieve academic excellence in the future. I'd like to tell you how you can do this by following 9 simple steps, which are explained in detail in the material you can download from the website. The first thing you should always do is be sure that your students are prepared to learn spelling strategies. What are the requirements? Well, first of all, and though it may seem obvious, they should be able to speak English. Second, they should be able to read and write with some ease. When a student reads or writes very slowly, it means that they are still decoding words phonetically, and they are not prepared to learn to visualize words. These are the basic requirements for beginning to teach the visual strategy. There is one more thing that is important. Your students should understand what spelling means. The second step is to tell your students the secret to good spelling, the same thing I explained to you earlier. If you can't visualize or see words, you won't know how to spell them correctly. You won't know for sure how to spell a word unless you can recall the image of that word in your mind. That is the secret. And it is important to explain this because very often when you tell your students the secret, they say, "No way, I can't believe it. I never thought about that before. That's not how I do it. Now I understand." And that realization helps them because they see that it is not their fault they are bad spellers. And it motivates them because they understand that if they learn to see the words, they will be better students, just like all the other children who are already good spellers. Once you have explained the secret, the third step is to do an objective evaluation of your students' spelling. If you use this method, you will see that your students' spelling will improve between 50 and 80%. This is especially true for the students who have the most difficulty with spelling. So, in order to see these results, you need to conduct an objective evaluation. Here, I would like to take a moment to explain an evaluation method which might be new to you. Some people might think it is an unusual way to evaluate spelling, but if you hear me out, I'm sure you will understand why it makes sense. Basically, the idea is to evaluate your students' spelling based on their average percentage of correctly spelled words. What I mean is, your students should not pass or fail spelling based on a particular dictation. They should not pass or fail based on the results of one specific writing exercise. if you take the average number of correctly spelled words from various exercises, you can objectively measure improvement for each student and compare your students' progress. Let me take a moment to show you this spelling book, which has already been published in several different languages. It gives students simple explanations of the things I have shared with you so far. It begins with a simple test to see if students are ready to start the process. Next, it explains the secret to good spelling in a way that is easy for students to understand. After that, the book gives a simple method for evaluating spelling using the average percentage of correctly spelled words. These are the first 3 steps in the process, and each one is very important. Once your students meet the requirements to begin learning this method, once they know the secret, and once their spelling has been objectively evaluated, it is time to move on to the 4th step, visual memory. Many students do not know what visual memory is. The book asks several simple questions to help them understand it, such as, what color is Superman's costume? Or, imagine that you are walking into your house. Have a look around. How many windows can you see? The answer really isn't important. But when a student imagines their house and starts to count the number of windows, you say, that is visual memory. Visual memory is when you see images in your mind. And suddenly, at this point, many auditory learners will say, oh, now I understand. I know what you mean. And this is very significant for them because otherwise, many of these auditory learners would not be able to understand the meaning of visual memory. The next step is to strengthen your students' visual memory. You have to be sure that all the students in your class, or anyone else who uses this technique, has a strong enough visual memory to be able to recall words. After trying different methods for strengthening visual memory, we found one that is very effective. The student's book I was telling you about before includes an exercise using different colored shapes to help improve visual memory. These shapes are on little cards that students can cut out and then use in pairs to practice. Once they have cut out the shape cards, your students can begin to work on their visual memory. Let me give you an example of the type of pair activity I'm talking about. Let's say that we are working together. I take any 2 shape cards and show them to you. For example, I might put the cards here where you can see them. Then I would say, can you please take a mental picture of these 2 shapes? This means you can still see them when you close your eyes. When you are ready, you say, okay, and I take the shape cards out of your sight. Then I ask you, what was the first shape? Or, what was the second shape? Which shape was red? Or what color was the circle? Was the square first or second? What I'm doing here is asking you questions that you can only answer if you visualize the shapes. The student's book includes step-by-step instructions that go with the shape cards and explain how to use them. After one student answers the questions, the roles are reversed and the other student will take their turn asking the questions. Once a student is capable of recalling 2 images at a time, they should move on to 3 images. And once they can remember 3, they should try to remember 4, then 5, then 6, and so on. However, after using this method with many groups of students, we have discovered that visual memory is strong enough when students are able to recall 4 shapes at a time. I say this because if you do this activity with the whole class, you can stop once you see that your poor spellers are able to recall 4 images. As long as everyone is able to remember at least 4, you'll be fine. If some of your students can recall more shapes, that's even better, but 4 is enough. And this is the end of step number 5 of the 9 steps, strengthening visual memory. Once you have worked on your students' visual memory, you are ready for step number 6. Step number 6 is linking visual memory with spelling. This will be the first time that many of your students will ever link visual memory with spelling. It will be an important change for them, their big step. And you should be sure that auditory learners take this step and use visual memory for spelling. That is why you must follow each step in this method. Each specific step will help you be sure that no students are being left behind. So, how does it work? First, you ask your students to cut out the cards and then get together with a partner. One student takes a word card and shows it to the other student. They say, "Take a mental picture. When you close your eyes, you should still be able to see this word on your magic screen. Then I'll ask you some questions about it." When the second student is ready, the first student should take the word card out of their sight and ask questions about it, such as, "What is the first letter? What color is the second letter? Which letter is red? Which letter is blue? Is the red letter first or second?" The questions asked should only be able to be answered if the image of the word is recalled. Once your students are able to remember words with 4 letters, you can move on. Your students are ready for the next step. When I have a big group of students, and some students can recall words with 4 letters while others are still trying to master 2- and 3-letter words, something I often do is ask the first students to try and remember 5- and 6-letter words. However, this is only for the students who finish first. You can move on to the next step once everyone in your classroom is able to remember words with at least 4 letters. The next step, step number 7, is mastering basic spelling words. In English, you often study lists of the most commonly misspelled words. In my opinion, this should be the case in any language. I'm going to suggest 2 different systems in order to practice these words. The first one I am going to tell you about is a computer program, and the second one is a method using small cards. Why is it so important to study lists of basic spelling words? Well, in most languages, there are very few words that produce the largest number of spelling errors. Therefore, if your students learn how to spell those words correctly, their average percentage of correctly spelled words will increase notably. If your students can learn to correctly spell the vocabulary words that they use most often, they will apparently be excellent spellers. Now, some might say, yes, but they will have a very limited vocabulary. In response to that, I would say, okay, maybe they will start out with a limited vocabulary, but there are other activities you can do in the future to help your students with that. Right now, you can be sure that your students have the tools they need to learn how to spell words correctly, now and in the future. So you see, it's crucial that your students study the most common spelling words, that you make lists of these spelling words, and that your students master them. I'm going to tell you 2 different ways you can do this. The first is an online computer program that anyone can use. There are 2 versions of this program. The first is a free, basic version that's available for anyone to use. And the second way is a premium, unlimited version available for an annual fee. In the case of schools or districts with very limited economic resources, the publishing company has no problem whatsoever giving them access to the premium version for a symbolic fee, or, if need be, at no cost at all. There is a reason for this, which you can read more about in the teacher's book that can be downloaded for free from the publisher's website. Boira Publishers is not only committed to helping students learn, it also has a social mission. It believes in the distribution of knowledge, and the economic limitations that students or schools may be faced with should not prevent students from having access to this learning tool. So, what this tool does, this software does, is help students practice 250 of the most common words used in English. And that's not all. It also lets students add their own words, words that they have difficulty with and need to practice. So you see, it will specifically ask each individual student the words that they have the most trouble with. Also, let's say that a student misspelled 5 words on a recent dictation. You can add those 5 words to the program, and it will help your student practice them, which means that the program personalizes the help it gives to every student. You can have a look at the software and see for yourself how it works at Boira Publisher's website. The next way you can help your students practice common spelling words is with a very simple system that you can find in the student's book. It uses small word cards that can be cut out, groups of 25 word cards, that contain some of the most commonly misspelled words. But how does this system work? How do you use the cards to study? Well, this method can be used by anyone, even schools with serious economic limitations. You simply print or cut out the cards, all 25 of them, and you put them in an envelope. Altogether, each student will have 4 envelopes. The 25 cards will go in the first envelope. Now, someone asks each student to spell these words. The words that students spell correctly should be put into the second envelope. The next day, students are asked to spell the words again, both the ones that they misspelled, which are in envelope number 1, and the words that they spelled correctly, which are in envelope number 2. All the words that students get right from envelope number 1 will go to envelope number 2, and the words they get right from envelope 2 will go to envelope 3. The next day, students are asked to spell the words again, and the same system is followed. For instance, if one of the words in envelope number 1 is friend, and the student says F-R-I-E-N-D, then this card would move to envelope number 2. The words that the student spells correctly from envelope 2 will move to envelope 3, and the words they get right from envelope 3 will move to envelope 4. In envelope number 4, you have the words that students have spelled correctly at least 3 days in a row. Any word from any envelope that a student misspells will automatically go back to envelope number 1. This means that all the words in envelope number 4 have been spelled correctly at least 3 days in a row. Envelope 4 contains the words that students know, and they should not be asked to spell these words every day. The words move up from one envelope to the next until students master their spelling. The words in envelope number 4 should only be asked once in a while to make sure that students do not forget them. When a student has only 7 or 8 cards left in envelopes 1, 2, and 3, it is time to add another batch of 25 word cards and start the process all over again. And when the majority of these new cards are in envelopes 4, except for 7, 8, 9, or 10 cards in the first 3 envelopes, then students should add the next 25 cards to envelope number 1. And this way, little by little, adding 25 new words at a time, students will create a system that runs smoothly and helps them study spelling more effectively. As a teacher, this system will also help you discover the words your students have the most trouble with. Once students add their own personalized cards to the envelopes, by collecting the number 4 envelopes and seeing what words are reoccurring, you can discover your students' most commonly misspelled vocabulary words. The thing about standard, commonly misspelled word lists is that they are often specific to geographic areas. For instance, the words that a student growing up in a rural area in Minnesota finds difficult are probably very different from the words that a student living in London or Sydney has trouble with. So you see, the envelope method will show you what the most commonly misspelled words are for your very own students. And this brings us to the end of step number 7. This is a very important step because here your students have mastered the most commonly misspelled vocabulary words. Which brings us to step number 8. You can find more details about step number 8 in the student's book, but basically this step is about consolidating the visual technique. It gives ideas for reinforcing it when copying or when doing activities such as reading. It helps students remember to use their visual memory when they are in public, when they see commercials, when they see signs. It reminds them how to save these words in their imaginary bag. This is step number 8, consolidating. And finally, we have step number 9. Step 9 is the same as step number 3, an objective evaluation of your students' spelling skills, using the average percentage of their correctly spelled words. Why is this important? Well, it shows you that your students have improved. You have figures that can verify that their spelling has gotten between 50 and 80% better than it was when you began. And this is the objective that I started out with when I began this presentation. So, I'd like to ask you to please remember to objectively evaluate your students at the end of the process. I'd also like to remind you that you can find more detailed information about this method on the website. If you have any questions, you will see that there is a forum on the website where you can share your experiences and ask about things that are not clear. The forum will be monitored regularly, so you are not alone in this project. Please visit the website, participate in the forum, and remember to evaluate your students objectively at the end of the process. That way you will see for yourself that what I've told you is true. After you complete this entire process, which may take you a few months while you invest in the future of your students, I assure you that after this, you will see how all other spelling activities will be more effective. After completing the process, you will see that although you used to have two types of students, those who learned spelling words easily and those who had some trouble no matter how hard they tried, now you will see that your entire class is capable of learning new spelling words fairly easily. You'll see that whether you do dictations, activities from workbooks, or any other type of spelling exercises, your students will be learning. And why? Because they are adding the words they learned to their word bag, and when they want to spell them, they can visualize these words. They use the same strategy that you do. What you have done is show your students how to use their visual memory for spelling, and that is the key. And this brings us to the end of this presentation. I hope that you find this information helpful. As I said before, please feel free to visit the website where you can download the teacher's book and find answers to your questions. I encourage you to share this presentation with others. Share the free materials that you can download from the website. And the reason I ask you to do this is very simple. Knowledge is not a secret. We have to share it. It's our duty. Spread the word. Your students should have all the possibilities for success. Do it for them. Spread the word. Our goal as teachers should be to make the future of education fairer than it is today. Thank you for your time. If I can be of any help, please feel free to contact me at the publishers. I'll do my best to answer you. Good luck, and thank you for your hard work.